This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note. This country is at war with Germany.
The mood on board the Nieuw Amsterdam was strange. It was May 10th, 1940. Half of the world was at war, and the Dutch liner was on the 5th day of a Caribbean cruise. Her passengers were mostly Americans. Their nation was officially neutral, as was the liner's home country, the Netherlands. But the clouds of war grew darker with each day, and many feared that it was only a matter of time before the war expanded. The Nieuw Amsterdam, one of the finest transatlantic liners afloat, had been relegated to the safety of New York Harbor. U-boats prowled the waters off Europe, and no one wanted to risk getting caught in the crossfire. But as she sailed off the coast of Venezuela, her radio operators received a frantic message from Holland America headquarters, ordering the ship to return to New York immediately. The Nieuw Amsterdam raced back to New York Harbor, zigzagging to avoid U-boats. The mood on board drifted from shock and fear to anger as they slowly realized what was happening at home. Without any formal declaration of war, the German military invaded the Netherlands, quickly overtaking the small country. The Dutch government was forced to flee across the English Channel to London, and Queen Wilhelmina narrowly escaped the country in the dead of night. The Netherlands, which had managed to stay neutral during World War I, was now under Nazi control, and the Nieuw Amsterdam, the nation's flagship, built to be a ship of peace, was now a prime wartime target. On November 23, 1890, King William III of the Netherlands passed away. The Dutch crown passed on to its only surviving child, 10-year-old Wilhelmina. The Netherlands was a relative latecomer to the Industrial Revolution, but as Queen Wilhelmina came of age, she proved to be a shrewd businesswoman. She used her vast inheritance to make a series of investments in the United States. These investments proved wise. Queen Wilhelmina amassed a massive fortune, becoming the first female billionaire in dollars. She would use this fortune to invest in Dutch industry in the 1920s and 1930s. These investments helped the Netherlands emerge as an industrial powerhouse, and Dutch shipping was a key component to the nation's growing economy. The Holland America Line was founded in 1873. Based in Rotterdam, the company proved popular, carrying over 400,000 passengers to the Americas in the line's first 25 years of service. Its fleet consisted of relatively modest liners, designed to efficiently carry migrants. But as the company grew and new laws stemmed migration to the United States, the company turned its focus to business travel and tourism. This generated a series of larger, grander liners with a greater focus on passenger comfort. By the mid-1930s, as the Great Depression began to ease, the company began planning a running mate for the wildly popular 29,000-ton SS Stottendam. While Harland and Wolff in Belfast, Northern Ireland built nearly every Holland America liner, including the Stottendam, growing industrial capacity in the Netherlands meant that this new liner could be built at home. The 1930s saw a wave of nationalistic fervor sweep Europe. The great liners had long been a source of national pride, but the tenor and pace of one-upsmanship had reached a fever pitch not seen since the years leading up to World War I. The new 36,000-ton liner would be an opportunity for the Netherlands to flex its might and compete with its larger European neighbors. The Rotterdam Dry Dock Company was awarded the contract to build the new ship for 13.5 million guilders. Funding was provided by the Dutch government to boost morale and help lift the nation's economy. Her keel was laid down on January 3, 1936, and designated yard number 200. Her original name was to be Prinsendam, but after more consideration, Holland America decided a better name would be the New Amsterdam, after the 17th century Dutch colony that was seized by the British in 1665 and renamed New York. On April 10, 1936, the new liner was launched into the River Maas, weighing in at 18,200 tons. She was christened by Queen Wilhelmina, and the event was watched by thousands of enthusiastic Dutch spectators. She gave a toast to the new ship, and the Dutch Minister of Economic Affairs, Henri Gillissen, replied, "God grant that this first happy launching of the flagship of the Dutch Merchant Navy may be a good omen, signaling a prosperous journey into the future. May the New Amsterdam carry the Dutch tricolor wide and long across the seas for the glory and benefit of our beloved country." The new liner was dubbed a ship of peace by the press, because unlike other ships of state at the time, the New Amsterdam was not designed to serve any wartime purposes. The New Amsterdam was designed to serve a rapidly changing world. Though primarily designed for transatlantic service, the new liner would have the versatility to accommodate cruises when needed. While other nations competed for speed and size records, the Holland America Line instead chose to focus on style and comfort, recognizing the growing potential of tourism. They set out to build a ship that would beautifully represent the Dutch people through art, engineering, and service. The New Amsterdam would come in at 36,287 gross registered tons, the largest liner constructed by the Netherlands at that point. She was 758 feet or 231 meters long, with a beam of 88 feet or 26.8 meters. She was powered by 6 boilers that fed dual reduction geared steam turbines to produce 34,000 shaft horsepower. She had a service speed of 20.5 knots and could carry 1,220 passengers across 3 classes and 700 crew. Several leading Dutch architects contributed to her interiors. Her public spaces were decorated with a restrained Art Deco style. Their designs were straightforward and placed comfort and livability over dazzle and drama. Art pieces were used intentionally, not to draw attention, but instead to create a refined and intimate atmosphere. These tasteful styles and high-quality materials were carried from first class into cabin class and even third. This continuity between classes allowed the liner to more easily convert to a single-class cruise configuration. It also made her more appealing to tourists, who appreciated quality accommodations even if they weren't luxurious. Creating less difference and distinction between classes was a strategy that also proved deeply successful on Cunard's Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth. She was also equipped with amenities like air conditioning and a high percentage of ensuite baths. She was only the second liner to feature a full theater, the first being the Normandy. The care and details devoted to her interiors made the New Amsterdam deeply popular with passengers, who appreciated the tasteful designs. She more than held up to her builders' intention to represent their nation in the best possible light. She was quickly dubbed the Darling of the Dutch.
The winter of 1939 and 40 was described by amateur statesmen and strategists as the period of the phony war. Cruise ships were sunk in the Battle of the Atlantic, and men died in this phony war, but there were no land battles.
The New Amsterdam left Rotterdam for her maiden voyage on May 10, 1938. The voyage took 5 days, 23 hours, and 45 minutes. The press showered her with praise, remarking on her bright, streamlined appearance, steady handling, and beautiful light-filled interiors. Over the next several months, she continued delighting passengers. At the end of the 1938 season, she smoothly transitioned to cruising. But as tensions in Europe mounted in 1939, culminating with the Nazi invasion of Poland on September 1st, the New Amsterdam's transatlantic voyages became crowded with refugees fleeing to the safety of New York. But when the war in the Atlantic began, after only 17.5 transatlantic voyages, the Dutch government and the Holland America Line decided that it would be safer to keep the Dutch flagship laid up in Hoboken in New York Harbor. The Netherlands remained neutral as the period known as the Phony War dragged on, and the Holland America Line decided to begin offering cruises between New York and southern tropical destinations. The words New Amsterdam, Holland were painted in bold white letters across her hull to deter any misidentification by Allied or German warships. These cruises continued into 1940, but by that spring, as the situation in Europe deteriorated and the war in the Atlantic picked up steam, they became less popular. Then, on May 10, 1940, the crew of the New Amsterdam got the news that they were dreading. Without any formal declaration of war, the German armed forces invaded the Netherlands. The small country was taken by surprise as the Nazis quickly overwhelmed them. The Dutch government fled across the English Channel, and Queen Wilhelmina narrowly escaped in the night. The liner was ordered to immediately return to New York Harbor. Tensions were high on board as they realized that they were now a target of war. But the real shock, horror, and fear set in as they realized what was happening at home. Staff Captain Rens Branson later wrote, "All I could think about was my wife Margaretha and our 2 daughters back home in Rotterdam, now living under the control of the German jackboot. From this point on, I did not hear from them for 5 years. I did not know if they were alive or not, and they had no knowledge of me." On September 12, 1940, the New Amsterdam was officially seized by the Dutch government in exile and transferred to the British Ministry of War Transport. The ship was placed under Cunard White Star management, though she kept a Dutch crew and continued to fly the Dutch flag. She arrived in Singapore on November 9, 1940, where she would be converted to a troop ship. Her fine fittings were stripped away, replaced with the utilitarian accommodations of up to 6,800 troops. Following her conversions, she mostly stayed in the Indian and Pacific Ocean until 1944. She carried troops from throughout the Allied nations, especially India, New Zealand, Australia, and the United States, as well as occasional prisoners of war. Conditions on board were cramped and uncomfortable, but reports suggest that the general mood was fairly positive despite the wartime tension. Soldiers passed the long days at sea with deck games, concerts, and other festivities. By 1944, the New Amsterdam returned to the North Atlantic, where she assisted with the troop buildup in preparation for D-Day. She would continue transporting troops in the Atlantic through the next year and helped repatriate troops when the war finally came to an end. In April 1946, she returned to full Dutch control. Her funnels were painted back to the Holland America colors, and on April 9, 1946, she set sail from Southampton to her home port of Rotterdam. Her return to her bombed-out home was a moment of huge celebration for the nation. Nearly every small craft capable of floating greeted her, and thousands lined the shore, waving the Dutch tricolor flag and shouting, "The darling of the Dutch." The New Amsterdam was in rough shape, covered with rust and damage from years of wartime service. She had transported 378,361 troops and traveled 530,452 nautical miles, proving a valuable asset to the Allied war effort. Now she was finally ready to resume the peacetime purpose she was built for. After her triumphant return home, the New Amsterdam sailed to the Rotterdam Dry Dock Company to begin conversions back to a luxury passenger liner. The process would not be easy. Nearly every surface and piece of furniture had to be restored or replaced. All her rubber flooring was beyond repair, as well as 85% of her carpeting. Almost all of her walls and ceilings had to be redone after hundreds of thousands of soldiers carved their initials and messages that might not have been suitable for the average passenger. All 374 of her private bathrooms had to be renovated, and she was rewired with over 300 miles of new electric cables. 12,000 square feet of her glazing had to be reinstalled after being painted over to keep light from giving away the ship's position, and nearly all of her handrails had to be refinished. Her furniture, which had been sitting in storage in San Francisco for 6 years, was shipped to the Netherlands, but many pieces were badly damaged. Thousands had to be refinished and reupholstered, and nearly a quarter had to be replaced entirely. The project was made even more difficult by post-war labor and material shortages. Costs exceeded the ship's original construction price. But on October 29, 1947, after 18 long months, the Nieuw Amsterdam was finally ready to resume passenger service. The results were well worth the wait. The refreshed liner was immediately popular as the world entered the final golden era of transatlantic crossings. Her ease and refined luxury quickly earned a reputation as a favorite among the rich and famous. She carried stars like Rita Hayworth, Jane Russell, Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and Spencer Tracy. Her transatlantic crossings saw high demand, and her seasonal cruises during the winter months also proved successful. The only wrinkle came on April 1, 1952, while in Kingston, Jamaica. The reduction gearing on her starboard propeller shaft broke. She was forced to cut her cruise short and limp back to Hoboken at just 13 knots, with decreased maneuverability. But still, she managed to arrive only half a day later than was scheduled. Passengers were given an 8% refund, and the damage was promptly repaired. By June, she was back in service. In 1956, the Nieuw Amsterdam underwent an extensive refit to keep her up to date. New air conditioning systems were installed, and she was fitted with a new stabilizer system. Her first and tourist class cabins were updated, and, most visibly, she adopted a new paint scheme. Her original black hull was painted a light gray. The new, brighter livery was adopted to help keep her cool in tropical climates and suited the liner beautifully. She remained hugely popular throughout the 1950s. While she enjoyed a nearly perfect safety record, she was not immune to misfortune. On October 21, 1957, while the ship was in Rotterdam, a fire broke out in a passenger space near her stern. The blaze was quickly contained and put out, but not before doing some significant damage. The liner was withdrawn for repairs and returned to service on December 9th. Just 1 year later, on December 12, 1958, on her last transatlantic voyage of the year, a rogue wave slammed into the ship. The force of the water shattered the windows on her bridge. A shard of glass cut Master Commodore Conrad Bowman's eye. He was taken off the ship and cove for treatment and wouldn't return until January 7, 1959 for her winter cruise season. Miraculously, his vision was not affected and he made a full recovery. On September 3, 1959, she was joined by the stylish and ultra-modern SS Rotterdam. The brand new ship had little impact on the Nieuw Amsterdam's loyal following, and the aging liner remained deeply popular. She underwent several further refits through the 1960s to keep her updated. But as the decade wore on, she was beginning to show her age. In April 1967, she experienced a major boiler failure that nearly took her out of service permanently. But the Holland America Line was committed to keeping the beloved 30-year-old liner running. After an extensive search for the necessary parts, she was repaired and returned to service later that year. One by one, the Nieuw Amsterdam's contemporaries were withdrawn from service. While she was once one of many, by the end of the 1960s, she stood alone, struggling to fill her cabins as she marched along on a lonely parade that only a precious few still cared to watch. By the 1970s, what once felt impossible became a reality. Air travel was now the preferred way to cross the Atlantic. The grand old liners that once dominated the seas had all been retired or relegated to cruises. A new crop of modern superliners carried the few passengers who still wished to cross the Atlantic by sea, but even these struggled to fill their cabins. Despite the growing headwinds, Holland America was determined to keep the New Amsterdam sailing her traditional schedule for as long as possible. But in her later years, these transatlantic crossings became ghostly excursions, often carrying more crew than passengers. Finally, in 1971, the painful decision was made to end these unprofitable crossings and devote the ship to full-time cruising between Port Everglades, Florida, and the Caribbean. Her versatility made her better suited than most historic liners for the tropical climates, and this new purpose initially showed promise. But the 1973 oil crisis sent fuel prices soaring, making the aging and inefficient liner impossible to keep in service. Recognizing the historic and cultural significance of the New Amsterdam, Holland America looked for a way to save the great liner. Taking inspiration from the Queen Mary's sail to the city of Long Beach, they began putting together a plan to turn her into a floating hotel and museum. But time was not on their side. Years of running at a deficit left the company in a dire financial position. Lacking the funds needed to hold onto the liner long enough to find a buyer willing to save her, the company was forced to quickly sell her for scrap. The New Amsterdam sailed her final passenger voyage on December 7, 1973. Soon after, she made a sad final voyage to Taiwan. She arrived at her final berth on March 2, 1972, where her engines were shut off for the final time, and she was cut apart over the next few months. By that October, the liner was gone. While largely forgotten today, the New Amsterdam was one of the greatest liners to ever sail the Atlantic. In a period of fierce nationalism and one-upsmanship, the Holland America Line didn't set out to break any records with her size or speed. They simply put everything into creating a ship that people would love. Every aspect of her design was devoted to passenger comfort, and that attention paid off. She was one of the only liners to make a profit in the 30s, and continued her profitability well into the 1960s, even as ocean travel was well on the decline. She had a loyal following for a reason. She was a true national symbol. Like the Queen Mary for Great Britain, the New Amsterdam perfectly represented the best of the Dutch people. She may not have been the largest or the fastest. She was simply really good. And sometimes, that's all you need. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this one, support the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.